Hey everyone. Welcome to the channel. You're about to dive into something epic, so buckle up. Rocket today, we've got an incredible The Spark of Defiance that will blow your mind. But before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on any of the exciting content coming your way. Let's jump right in. The Spark of Defiance. In the crumbling heart of the city, where the shadows of towering skyscrapers stretched long into the evening, a quiet revolution was beginning to take shape. The city, once a beacon of progress and innovation, had become a suffocating maze of corruption and control. The government, a monolith of bureaucrats and corporate giants, had placed the citizens under a veil of constant surveillance, manipulating their lives through systems of surveillance, technology, and power. Among the masses, there was only one thing that the people had left: hope. But in the depths of this hope was a spark, a single flame, that would eventually ignite something much bigger than anyone could ever imagine. It would be the spark of defiance. Elliot Gray sat at the edge of his desk, his gaze fixed on the screen in front of him. The sterile, gray office had long lost its charm, and the hum of the fluorescent lights above was the only sound that accompanied his thoughts. In front of him, a digital report flashed on the screen, outlining the latest policies of the Ministry of Order. It was a constant stream of oppressive directives that tightened the noose around the necks of the citizens, enforcing even more stringent control over every aspect of life. Elliot had worked as a data analyst for the government for over 5 years, but something inside him had changed. At first, he had been eager to take on the role, believing that the systems in place were meant to protect and serve the people. But as time passed, he began to see the truth. The data he analyzed was not about helping anyone, it was about controlling them. His role in the system was to ensure that citizens' movements, choices, and even thoughts were monitored and manipulated. He remembered the day the new order had been passed. The Ministry of Order had issued a decree that all individuals must submit to a daily biometric scan. Any deviation from the prescribed behavior would be flagged, and those deemed to be a threat would be removed. The population, fearful of repercussions, had reluctantly accepted the changes. But Elliot couldn't ignore the fact that the government was no longer concerned with keeping the peace, it was now solely focused on maintaining power. That night, as Elliot sat in his cramped apartment, he overheard a conversation in the hallway. It was a whisper, soft but urgent. He strained to hear. "We can't keep doing this. The surveillance, the tracking, it's too much. They're watching our every move." The voice was familiar, his neighbor, Lila. Elliot had known Lila for a few years. She worked as a teacher at the local school, and although they didn't speak often, they had shared an unspoken understanding of the weight that had come to rest on their shoulders in recent years. The government had gone too far, but no one dared to question it. Fear and paranoia had crippled the population, and the consequences of dissent were too severe for anyone to take action. Yet, as he listened to Lila's words, something shifted inside him. The spark he had been suppressing for so long flared into life. He wasn't the only one who felt this way. There were others who were silently questioning the system, those who saw through the lies, but they were too afraid to speak out. He rose from his chair, and before he knew it, he was knocking on her door. Lila opened it cautiously, her face etched with concern. "Elliot, what are you doing here?" "I heard what you said," he replied, his voice low. "I agree. This can't go on." Her eyes widened, as though seeing him for the first time. You're one of them, aren't you? You work for the government." "I do," he admitted. "But I'm starting to see that we're not on the right side. The more I see, the more I realize how wrong this all is." Lila took a step back, her expression softening. "Then you know what we have to do. It's time to fight back." The underground. Elliot's conversation with Lila was the beginning of something far larger than either of them had anticipated. Over the next few days, Lila introduced Elliot to a secret group, hidden in the deepest corners of the city. They called themselves the Spark, and their sole purpose was to ignite a revolution against the system. The group was small, but it was growing. People from all walks of life, teachers, former government officials, technicians, and ordinary workers had come together, united by a single, powerful belief: the government's control had gone too far, and they had to stop it before it was too late. The members of the Spark worked in secrecy, using encrypted communications and carefully planned movements to stay under the radar. Their leader, a woman named Mara, was a former high-ranking member of the Ministry of Order. She had once believed in the system, but after witnessing the atrocities committed in the name of control, she had defected and vowed to dismantle the regime from within. "We can't keep hiding forever," Mara said during their first meeting. "The time to act is now. If we wait any longer, there won't be anything left to save." Elliot, who had only recently begun to question the regime, felt a surge of adrenaline. The fire inside him, which had been a flicker for so long, was now a roaring blaze. It was time to fight back. The first strike. The plan was simple, yet dangerous. The Spark would strike a major government facility, the central hub for the surveillance system that monitored the entire city. The operation had to be quick, precise, and most importantly, silent. If they were caught, the consequences would be dire, but if they succeeded, they would send a message: the people were no longer afraid. The night of the strike arrived. Elliot and the others gathered in a hidden warehouse on the outskirts of the city. They wore dark clothing, their faces obscured by masks. Mara gave a final briefing, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "We'll breach the facility, disable their surveillance systems, and broadcast our message to the entire city," she said. "This is our moment." Elliot's heart pounded in his chest as he followed the group through the darkened streets. The city, usually alive with the buzz of activity, was eerily quiet. The streets felt like a maze, the towering buildings casting long, ominous shadows. The Spark had planned every step carefully, knowing that the slightest mistake could lead to disaster. When they reached the facility, the team split into smaller groups, each with a specific task. Elliot's job was to disable the main power grid, cutting off the surveillance systems that kept the city under constant watch. His hands shook as he approached the control panel. He had spent months studying the facility's layout, memorizing every wire and switch, but nothing could have prepared him for the gravity of the moment. He could hear the distant hum of the security systems, and his mind raced. One wrong move, and they would be caught. Taking a deep breath, Elliot reached out and flipped the switch. The lights flickered. Then, silence. The broadcast. With the surveillance systems down, the team quickly moved to the next phase of the plan. They gathered in the central control room, where Mara set up the equipment to broadcast their message to the entire city. The air was thick with tension, but there was also an undeniable sense of excitement. Mara looked at Elliot, her eyes filled with resolve. "This is it. You're the one who's going to send the message." Elliot nodded, his pulse racing. The screen in front of him flickered to life, and he began to type. "For too long," the message began, "we have allowed ourselves to be controlled, watched, and manipulated. The government has stolen our freedom, our rights, and our voices. But no more. The people of the city are waking up, and we will no longer live in fear. This is the Spark of Defiance." As the message broadcasted across the city's vast network, people everywhere began to notice. In homes, offices, and public spaces, the message appeared on screens of every size. It was a cry for justice, a declaration of war against the regime that had ruled their lives for so long. The aftermath. The broadcast sent shockwaves through the city. The government quickly realized that their surveillance systems had been compromised, and they scrambled to regain control. But it was too late. The Spark had ignited a fire that could not be put out. In the days that followed, Protests erupted in every corner of the city. People who had once been silent and afraid now found their voices. The government attempted to suppress the uprising, but the momentum was unstoppable. Elliot stood among the crowd, watching as the people marched, their faces filled with determination. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive. The road ahead was uncertain, and the fight was far from over. But the spark had been lit. And no matter what happened next, the flame of defiance would continue to burn, brighter than ever before. The dawn of change. Months later, the regime that had once ruled with an iron fist was no more. The government had collapsed, and a new era of freedom was dawning. The Spark, once a small, secretive group, had become a symbol of hope and resistance for all the oppressed. Elliot stood at the edge of the city, watching as the sun rose. If you're loving what you're watching and want to see even more exciting videos on insert topic of your channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.